introduce this speed talk with a very special guest that is Roberto Cavallo. I guess that at this point of the workshop, you all know the formula that we are using, like the speed talks, what they and what is the importance of this moment. I guess they are very interesting opportunity for sharing the attitude, the methodology, some theoretical reflection of our visiting professors about the project and the process of the project. So very short communication, but very focused and oriented in understanding the role of the project for this strategical area of Milan. As well as you know, the speed talk formula, you probably also know our guest, Roberto Cavallo. He's one of the professors coordinating this workshop. You all probably know that he's associate professor at Delft University of Technology, and he had covered also important roles within the university. He's now chairing the section of Theory and Territory. He's member of the Department of Architecture Research Steering Team. In his career, he also had an intense professional activity, working as an architect in the Netherlands and in many offices, and co-founding in 1999 the office Studio AI in Amsterdam. He has also collaborated with, as an expert with the European Commission. So I guess he's able to give us a spread view of the architectural project, including not only the academic view, but also a professional and in a way political approach and understanding the reasons of the project in a very large scenario. His research is focused on the interactions between infrastructures and the cities in relation to the urban transformation. So I'm very pleased to give the stage to Roberto Cavallo, and we will meet after the presentation for 10 minutes of discussion. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks a lot for introduction, Martino. I will start sharing my screen, see if it works. You just tell me if you see it properly and if you... let's see if it works.
Yes, we are seeing your screen.
I have to get it back. Wait, because I'm on the wrong slide, so I have to try to get it back to the right slide. Wait a moment. I will try to do that. Otherwise, I'll just scroll back. Wait. Because, oh wait, yes, I think it will work now. Do you see this, the first slide?
Perfect.
Okay, thanks a lot for the introduction, Martino. And I will be put together some compilation of some initial thoughts, just that I would like to share with you about how I see the field of architecture at this moment, and also combining some one or two projects that I was lucky to participate myself with the office, but also looking at the context, looking at the vicinity of these projects, where I could find also some other projects that could be interesting for the students as well, as we are in this workshop. So I will try to be concise. I have quite a lot of material, so I'll just go on. How do I see the field of architecture nowadays? I see it as a field of knowledge that is in dynamic expansion. Of course, it is not a new thing, but I think nowadays, more than ever, this dynamic expansion of architecture is really let's say the connotation of our field. And so we have to lean on our expertise on what we have learned, but we have to open up to other way of learning, and with our knowledge field is, let's say, expanding much more, comprehending much more stuff. So it's also very difficult to keep pace, to keep everything under control nowadays. But the fact that architecture works through an epistemic feature, so there are different positions, that there are different aspects, that there are different specific interests, I think is an asset. I think it's an asset, so we should look that as being an advantage, because we can tap in the different connotation of this expanded field of architecture, and we can make our work be adjusted and also encounter what we have to do. And to do that, I think it's necessary more than ever nowadays to combine the discursive, more theoretical position and the specific knowledge developed in that area with the design-driven positions. I mean, it's not a new thing that in the architecture field we have somehow this kind of dual syndrome between the theoretical experts and the one more practice-driven and design-driven. I think we have to join forces more than ever to go forward. And the collaboration with other knowledge areas is really much more important nowadays, not only because the profession is getting very multifaceted and comprehending many more specific features that we have to know about, but also because we can learn from collaborating with other flanking disciplines, and we have to do it much more often than we used to. And to do that, as we are also working at the university, I think this is a very good opportunity that we can do by connecting research, but also practice with education. And to do that, to kind of tie the relationship that we're having with the other discipline. Well, as Martino introduced, I have, of course, expertise in all kinds of facets in our field, but my specific research and the one on which I developed my PhD is about infrastructure and relation with architecture. And I took the perspective of the Dutch city as a kind of being representative one. I'm not sure if you see my cursor, maybe you do. Maybe you can just confirm, one of you.
No, at the moment we're not seeing.
Okay, then I assume you won't see it, so I will just do it by words. I would just I'm just showing you here the dimension and the perspective of that infrastructural approach that goes on for centuries in the Netherlands and the Dutch city. You can see left on the upper side the Randstad, more or less at the year 2000. And next to it, in the 1850, you can see that not only cities expanded, but also the network between cities expanded as well, and also the land itself expanded with some reclamation areas and projects that took place in these 150 years. So the connotation of the whole country has changed because of the infrastructure and the relation with the infrastructure. You can see on the right side the very first canal. You might recognize the city of Amsterdam and the city of Haarlem connected by that canal that goes as early as 1631. It was a canal functioning the way you see underneath, having a tow path connected with a boat, and a number of horses were pulling that boat, and that was a very well developed passenger but also freight transportation system between the cities. And this system was very well developed in the Netherlands already by the 17th century. Of course, when the railway came about, if somebody can help me with that, but well, maybe some of you can help. When the railway came about in the 19th century, that changed completely the connotation of the Dutch city. You can see on the upper right, the city of Amsterdam. All the iconography of the Dutch city is always developed from the water towards the city. So that's why you see pictures like that. And when the railway came, basically that part of the city changed drastically because the cities weren't able to host such a transportation system. So very quickly, viaducts, bridges appeared in the city, as you can see down left. And the situation went on and on, also in the 20th century, where next to railway viaducts to accommodate vehicular traffic had to be realized. So this kind of fractures, let's say obstructions and divide effect was even increased in the 20th century. You can see this is a picture from the Dam Square looking towards the water before the construction of the railway. You can see the typical connotation of the Dutch city, round and seen from the water. The water is not only something to master, but also that was the communication system that was widely used. And when the railway came and the central station was realized, that part of the cityscape was forever gone. So it was also a very radical, drastic, let's say, change in at the level of the cityscape. And that, of course, in the project that I'm making a wide jump up to nowadays, in the transformation project of the central station in Amsterdam, you can see in yellow this attempt to reconnect in terms of public space the historical city at your left hand with the water at your right hand. That part is being conceptually freeing out in the project in order to kind of connect again the city towards the water. So that's a kind of thing that is quite recurrent in the center of Amsterdam. And of course, these kind of pictures are really indicating that these situations were quite clear when we talk about the station, of course, but of course, the intermingling, the mixing of the railroad, particularly the railroad transportation with other new means of transportation and the city was something that was noted very much also, not only in our field, but also from artists like Sironi. I mean, it's for the Italian colleagues is very much known. Sironi and people at that moment understood very well that this kind of new feature of the city had to be envisioned, had to be kind of more prominently be part of the cityscape. And so the problem was not only about accommodating station and reducing the effect, but also creating a coexistence between the city and the new means of transportation. For those reasons, my research was not very much, let's say, focusing only on stations, but also how these new systems of connecting the stations, what kind of new projects, what kind of new visions towards the city would eventually imply. So you are looking here at utopian project of Joseph Paxton for the Great Victorian Way in London, basically creating a kind of connecting girdle between all the terminus station of the City of London. And one of the representative projects in this series is for sure the Stadtbahn of Vienna, the project of Otto Wagner, where he was able to combine the general plan of Vienna with the realization of 4 metropolitan railway lines. This is a project where really this opportunity of combining the general plan with the realization of the railways provided the not only the conceptualization, but actually also the outrolling of this project of the infrastructure within the city. So you can see drawing like that, where the new means of transportation is somehow integrated with the city of blocks, with the city of boulevards, and it's also envisioned. The buildings are not anymore just viaducts, are not anymore utilitarian support for the transportation, but are becoming also a new series of buildings for the city. This is a very important message that Wagner transmits also to the nowadays situations, because basically nowadays we are all facing these kind of situations. Our cities are entangled within these infrastructures lines that are kind of enclosing the city. And we are facing the challenges of these kind of areas where things just happen to be next to one another because of the systemic way the city works. So, but all systems are just next to one another, and the integration of the system is still a challenge, particularly in terms of spatial performance. Situations like this are quite typical. This is a photograph of the outskirts of London. Things just happen next to one another, and it's our task as architects to kind of create cross connections while dealing with these locations. Actually, every project could uncover and reveal leads to something in the context that took place because of this systemic way the city work. And so in terms of the city of Amsterdam, just to conclude this premise, those areas that I was pointing out, the areas of infrastructure, particularly around the historical cities, are becoming very, very important area because of the new plans for densification of this part of the city. So all these areas of infrastructure are in the middle of the attention nowadays because will be the areas that can profit very much from the accessibility point of view. All the railway hubs are located in this area, and they can be, let's say, the engines of the new city transformations for the next 10 to 30 years. So this is why it makes also very much sense to look into the working of this area, but also the spatial performance of this area, which is very poor at this moment. In fact, when we look at the Netherlands, the first city where this metropolitan railway project really took place, it isn't Amsterdam, it's Rotterdam. This is a picture of Rotterdam. As you might know, Rotterdam was almost completely destroyed by the bombing of the Second World War. It is also the city where the first metropolitan railway line as such was done. And so I'm going to jump to Rotterdam and show you the first project in that location. You might recognize the plan of Rotterdam, the water, and you see the station there on the upper side of the picture, the new station. And just right next to that, on the corner right, you see the area that I would like to point out. It's also an area connotated really by the infrastructure really being present in the area. And I'm zooming in. The area that I'm talking about is just a little bit to the right from the central station, maybe 2 blocks from central station. You can see the long building, almost north-south. This is the building I'm talking about. The complex is a complex, very renowned one, the Acragon and Technicon complex done by Maaskant. Maaskant is a very known architect in the Netherlands who did a lot of public buildings after the Second World War. One of the major, let's say, conveyor of the message of the post-war reconstruction of the city, and in particular of the city of Rotterdam. And these projects were also the projects that were meant to be the symbol of this Rotterdam of being the progressive city, the city of the future, if you want, by means of this new language, maybe even bigger sizes, but also pushing the programs and creating flexibility into the program. So the Acragon Tower was the tower where a number of sport facilities, along which also even a swimming pool, are located. And they were going to work together with the longitudinal building that was addressing a multiple school programs. Well, we had the luck to work to a building just next to this complex. You can see the front. That's an historical building which used to be the main quarter of a bank, the one in brick that you see here in the pictures. And our assignment was to work at the back side. You can see the building here at the back. It was an extension made right after, I think in the 50s, beginning of the 60s, of this bank building, which looked very much utilitarian. It was just adding surface to the front building. And you can see also the challenge of the public area, which is basically hundreds of tiles without really meaning anything for this public area. Of course, what interested us were the connection between this existing building and the extension, what to deal with that. The assignment was to basically take care of the extension. And it was quite a strange, if you want, assignment, because we were contacted by a private developer. This was a private property, and the private developer just wants to have the best possible solution in order to completely refurbish this extension of the building and to have also the best possible performance. in terms of square meters. So it was quite a hard competition. It was we had to team up and compete with other groups which we didn't know who they were because it wasn't a public or open competition. And so we were looking at this building and this very poor, the poor building full of asbestos panels in the elevation, among other things, and this public space. That was our assignment, how to resolve that problem. And we were puzzling, we kept on puzzling about this extension of the building, what to do, how to act, how to eventually create this new situation for this building. And at that moment, at our office, we were having occasionally contact with a number of collective of artists. So we decided to, instead of just having them and exposing them their things in our office and having a vernissage and opening and creating a little bit of dynamic, we decided to kind of let them have a glimpse into this. And this conversation brought us very much in, let's say, looking at the area again. You can see in this picture, even myself looking again at these closed windows on the ground floor, my colleague taking pictures. We were kind of figuring out what is the wider meaning of such a building in the area, the railway very close by, this public space that wasn't really making sense except functioning as a parking. And so we started looking at the possible interconnection that we could make. But of course, the main topic was also how to fulfill these requirements from the project developer. That was quite heavy one. And of profit oriented. At the end, we came out with this solution. This is the extension, basically, schematically, and we came out to create some cut. That was our topic. Let's create some cut into the existing extension of this building. And by means of that, maybe we could articulate the building a little bit better towards the public space, maybe installing a catalyst effect into that area that was facing the Mascant complex as well. So we start puzzling, making some diagrams here, and you can see this is the grammar that at the end by which we could explain our strategy to the developer. You can see at the left the existing building, something that we detect. We deducted that part from the existing building, including the possibility to make the cuts into the built fabric, and then we were adding another part which we could do also to taking advantage of something on the top of the existing structure to kind of increase also the surface of the building, but also to articulate these cuts in a proper way. So at the end, the struggles were how to resolve this very, very kind of static floor plan, integrating even a parking system on the ground floor, along with an entrance area that you can see on the top of the floor plan, where the entrance is located, but also some other facilities on the ground floor and some other office unit with the upper floors, which were first, let's say, open office floors, but also with this concept of creating the cut, so creating different, let's say, wings of this office building, but also different kind of looking at the public area. Also, let's say, enlarging the perspective of the view from the inside the building as well as creating more dynamic from the public space. Well, I'm just showing this not because of the sake of the detail. This is the detail that made us basically win this closed competition. Because as you might know, the surface in these cases is calculated up to the glass of the window. So by hearing that, we could resolve, let's say, the concept of the facade, but also create as much as possible surface that made very happy the developer, but at the end, it delivered very, very good result for us as well. I'm just showing you the other detail of the corner and the way we have been playing out these new elevations into the sections. You can see here the section and the relationship between the existing and the new building and the topping added. You can see more lightweighted in this section. Also, we made a very wide study about the orientation of the panels, how to deal with the sun, with the values of the sun and their connotations from inside and outside the building according to the orientation of the facades. So all these kind of things were sorted out, and together with the provider of the elevation, we invested quite a lot of time, but at the end, we had resolved that in a quite good way, we thought. But also, eventually, we had created a kind of very good kind of envelope around this building at the end that convinced very much not only the client, but also the Commission of Aesthetic of the municipality of Rotterdam. I mean, kind of creating a transition between the existing building and the Maaskant building at the other side that were conceived also in a different era. So I'm going very quickly through this. You can see the photograph, the collage that we made at the end, and part of the constructions. Particularly the stripping of this asbestos part had to be eliminated completely, but the structure revealed to be quite solid. So our thought of having a top floors added went through, so it was feasible as well, which was quite a happy moment. You can see how things were and how the bare structure of the building was revealed at a certain point. It was quite fascinating to actually see everything as bare as such a structure can be. And you see here also the moment of the shaping of the new building, the completely refurbished building with the additions of this original were true, but at the end we could make even 3 floors on top of the existing structure. Again, some pictures from the public space. This is, of course, those are the pictures that we took at when the project was delivered some years ago. You can see already the effect of the building through the trees and let's say the encountering of this new refurbished building with the existing one. We found, let's say, to have a kind of well thought, let's say, encountering, improving the situation that the existing building was having, but also creating a new dynamic towards the public space and towards the building. You can see also the way the openings were kind of rightly located into the paneling system of the building, and also our existing and new were completely distinct, but also not really having a much better coexistence degree than the other building was putting forward. We took care also the interior. These things are very crazy because you get asked to solve everything, but you don't know who is actually getting into the building. And the only commission you are getting is to take care of the entrance, which is a very crazy thing, but we did. We weren't asked to create the subdivisions in this huge office building, which is a quite crazy thing because we had all kind of ideas that we eventually proposed to the developer, but at the end we could realize only the entrance and the main lobby of the building, and we just delivered all kind of ideas that some of the companies who rented actually the office building also put forward in their plans. Again, some other pictures, how it works from the area. And well, quite nice because we were in our discussions, these kind of pictures were put forward after, a couple of years after. This square has been also, this public space, I should say, it has been also an experimental, it has been the ground for an experimental project, the so-called water square made by the urbanisten, who put forward this renewed public place where a water square could be envisioned, working when the water is not there in this way and enhancing certain kind of usage, because let's not forget, at the right side you have a lot of schools, a lot of kids visiting the building every day, and how that could look like when the water is there. Again, this is not a project made by us, but we were quite pleased that these kind of initiatives took place, just showing that the systemic way and the way the city is layering step by step not always makes sense, but sometimes it does. So things are getting in a certain synergy to one another. And we were very pleased that we could start having that conversation, and we were able also to transmit our ideas towards the municipality of Rotterdam, and eventually giving even the rise to some of these experiments. You can see this is the main connection from the central station, getting out at the northern side of the central station of Rotterdam, going towards the location. You can see the existing building, the brick building, the building that we refurbished, and in the back at the end, the building of Maskant, creating a kind of nice layering skyline of the city as well. What I wanted to show you, and it's a pity that I cannot use the cursor, if you just look carefully to this image, you will see very close to the station on your right hand, and very close to the complex I was showing you, a yellow corridor with a circle. This is a very known project called the Luchtensingel. It's a project made by ZUS, ZUS. It's an office located in Rotterdam. It's quite a known project, quite useful also for our students, because it's a project born from a crowdfunding initiative in order to connect these different fragments of the city that are now disconnected due to the presence of the infrastructure, and namely train, but also the streets that are quite wide, dividing the two parts of the city. You can see the roundabout down in the picture there, and the 2 lanes street ending on the roundabout. This is a very difficult point in terms of traffic for the center of Rotterdam, and this Luchtensingel project is just working in that direction to connect these fragments and create new synergy. So a lot of other activities are taking place, even on the roof of this beginning of the railway tunnel. You can see that in green, things are taking place due to the presence of that. You can see it very close here. You see very clearly this yellow pathway that is even trespassing some existing building. You can see it on your left hand, where the yellow is continuing inside the courtyard. That's the ski block, the so-called ski block. It's also a block under attention right now, under development. And you can see the connection with the roof topping of the railway tunnel, which is starting exactly there, right after the complex of Maskant, of which you can see the tower just at the upper side of this picture. Just showing you that very quickly, you can see that all the sponsors, according to the money they've been delivering in the crowdfunding, get a little bit more of wooden, parts into this project. So you can see their names, and you see their names protruded according to the amount of money that they've been putting into the project. This is very much in proportion. And well, for the one being interested, you can look into what this project really brought forward in terms of connection, but also is quite an exemplary way to connect and stitches all these different fragments of the city. Let's make a jump. Let's go to Amsterdam now. You will recognize the plan of the city of Amsterdam, the city center in the middle. On your right hand, in the water, you might recognize also Aalburg, these artificial islands that are being laid in the last 10 to 15 years, and that is going to continue in the coming years for housing development. And on your left side, you see part of the harbor, which is more and more being transposed towards the west, towards the North Sea. And what is very peculiar of the city of Amsterdam, you can recognize already here, maybe the next one even better, is the canal structure. The canal structure that was, let's say, the original structure of the city of Amsterdam, but which has been characterized very much by this extension of the 17th century, the so-called golden century in the Dutch history, where the trade with the East, with the colonies was really, really very, very much developed, and where a lot of money was being brought back to the city and allowed the city to make a very ambitious plan, this extension of the city. You can see the extensions by means of the bulwark, the bastions, and lay down these canals and protruding this idea of the canals, with certain exceptions on the left side, which is the sides where the original harbor was located. Well, there is a lot of study about this. I will just go very, very quickly into that. That was also the area where, let's say, some peculiar facilities would be positioned in the later years for a very simple reason. Because of this fortification area, the city could not expand further. That was the limit of the city. So some kind of exceptions were taking place. And later, well, we can see here a little bit the kind of chronological development of this area from the 17th century scheme on your left hand. How the wall, let's say the city wall, was locating. Then after the abolishment of the city wall, so when the city wall could be demolished in 1874, how that delivered the occasion of creating new buildings and new facilities for the city in places that the city didn't have before, but also in sizes that the city didn't have before. Let's not forget that the city of Amsterdam is quite compact and quite dense. So it was really a relief that this area could be used for new facilities in the late 19th century. And you can recognize very much this area in the middle of the picture, where this Singelgracht, this canal that was following the, let's say, the bulwark, the bastions of the former fortification is located. This is a very interesting area because it's connecting different parts of the city. It's connecting also the new, so-called new part of the city with very much the historical center. And it's the place where some very peculiar project took place. So I'm going to concentrate on this area. You might recognize in the middle of the picture the Rijksmuseum by Kuipers. It's a very known building, of course, refurbished also by Cruz and Ortiz. And some years ago, positioned right outside the fortification walls and opening up towards the museum square where the other museum are located, the Stedelijk Museum and the Van Gogh Museum. And you can see upper left of the Rijksmuseum, you see a cross-like building and a building next to it. That was also one of these peculiar plots that was delivered after the demolition of the city walls. It's a plot where a penitentiary facility was located, a prison, basically, and where this idea of having a front building towards the city and having a more utilitarian building towards the water was being put forward in the 19th century. Well, this penitentiary was done. You can see the effect of having such a kind of behavior towards the water already in this picture. It's not a very old picture, maybe 40 to 50 years ago. And you can see that the water was always being a little bit more the backside of the site, and the frontage was always the one towards the city. So that is also a kind of connotation of all these plots facing the water. But of course, in the later years, things have been changing and the water is much more used as an amenity, as a kind of added value nowadays, for sure. The building that I would like to show you is this building. It used to be called the Vrijgemeente. It's now called Paradiso. It's quite a known building in Amsterdam, particularly in the scene of entertainment. It's a pop center in the city of Amsterdam. But originally, the building was done right after the demolition of the city walls in the 1880s by architect Salm for a association which was called the Vrijgemeente. And it was an association that was putting forward a new way of interpreting religion. So it was a building open for all kinds of religion, Catholic, Christian, but also other kind of religion other kind of people and religion could be part of this association. It's a very, very kind of, let's say, striving toward the future, you might say, of understanding religion at that time. We are talking about the last years of the 19th century. So the building kept on functioning because of certain, let's say, very important encounters and also people behind this organization. And it looked like very much like a church with a front building. So you have a front building facing the city. You can see it on your right hand. and a kind of church-like idea in the middle. But of course, the intention of the one asking for this building was not at all identifying themselves with the church, but just a building that could be an encounter for all kind of religion. You can see the way it was looking like, a lot of chairs. It could host up to 1,200 people in the early days, just all of them sitting on the top floor as well. On the first floor, you can see there. Here, another picture how it used to be like. And in the 1960s, the association decided to sell the building to allow a development of an hotel at that spot. And fortunately, we have to say that hotel development didn't get through. So the building kept staying there in the area. And it was a few years later, be given the opportunity to a cluster of artistic encounters to use the building. So from that moment on, the building was getting used by artists, by musicians, and it was a kind of cluster, a creative cluster up from the beginning of the 70s. And took the name Paradiso quite soon, already in the 70s. You can see that some connotations of the original building stayed, of course, but other features were dismantled, were be given a little bit more, a more contemporary look, you might say, but in a kind of very fragmented way. So we took care, this is the way the building was looking like. Some of the chairs, you can see, were still staying there, very old chairs as well. But the assignment that we had to resolve was to adapt this building to the contemporary use, which is basically a concert machine, having even 2 or 3 concerts per day in 2 different halls, big halls and a secondary, much smaller halls, and allowing also the loading and unloading of materials, which was quite a burdening point for the municipality and for the vicinity. So, but we had to deal with the fact that the outskirt of the building is considered a monument. So that was quite a pathway to get to the final solution. So the things that we did, I'm sorry for the slide in Dutch, is about increasing capacity, improving the infrastructure, improving the way the building looks like, also improving the climate inside the building. It was quite an issue, particularly with the concert, and improving the working condition of the people being in the building. So the program was located exactly in this area under the ground, improving the connection with the top floors, also this area above the ground to allow the loading and unloading material, but also to create a new, we came up with the idea basically to create a new floor within the existing sides of the building in order to accommodate a little bit more people there, but also to at the same time accommodate these climate issues, the new air conditioning system in a kind of sandwich floor, which turned out to be a very brilliant idea, because if you don't know it, you don't really recognize. I will show you the pictures. And of course, we used the roof also. You can see these small towers of the installation also to as a kind of plenum inside the ceiling for installation purposes, and as well as the flooring of the stage. So you can see a little bit in color what we did. And also we took care of the frontage, so all the whole staircase, but also the front building where all the offices of the Paradiso organization are located. Again, showing the project, you can see some pictures of the building site. This stuff under the ground, you know, in the Netherlands is quite a sensible thing. As soon as you make a hole in the ground, the major problem is the water. So we came across a lot of other things there, also nice things, because of the area we were dealing with in the fortification area. Some kind of archaeological rest came about. So the Office of Archaeologists of the municipality came. It was quite a nice thing that we could map, and eventually part of this were kind of reused in the project as well. One of the biggest issues we are having just to adjust and connect to these doors, because these doors weren't fulfilling the acoustic requirements of the building. But of course, at the other side, we had the office of the monument of the city of Amsterdam to deal with. At the end, we managed, but it was quite a long pathway. So this is part of explaining you these conditions. Each project has got its condition, its constraints, and we have to connect all these fragments, and we have to kind of even foresee what kind of other connection could be envisioned. At the end, you can see part of, you can see the outside construction that we made, very much recognizable, in a very much recognizable material that stands out compared to the existing structure and the brickwork of the building. You can see the other side. Also, we had to take care of the emergency exit from the top floors, particularly the first floors, and we integrated with the design of this covered area for loading and unloading. Also, we took care a little bit of the frontage towards the water, which was completely neglected. This is the inside. You can see that the second balcony almost disappears there, but it's the new additions that we made, also recognizable in the way we treated the balustrade, but also the way we treated the floors. And here again, all the installation areas combined with the building, but also the staircases that are coming from the new second floor towards the first floor. Very quickly, I'm going to go through it, so we have some time also for questions. Also, of course, we could accommodate a little bit more installations and techniques along with the new balcony. So it is quite a added value at the end. And also the stitching and the recomposition of the original floor, which was a set of very special tiles ordered to a very special factory in the north of the Netherlands. And we could kind of recompose this floor to create, let's say, a plausible, let's call it plausible patterns of how the floor could have looked, how the floor could have looked like. And you can see also inserted a mezzanine floor that we created in order to have this in between areas, but also to have possible some new rooms that could be used by the visitors, but also by the employees of the Foundation Paradiso. You can see the way the new floors and the new staircase are encountering the existing windows as well. So exactly with some crucial part of the window frames. And some other pictures. The new bar on the first floor, almost disappearing. That was a wish. Also the foundation, and something that we could integrate with a smaller concert hall. And also we took care of the basement, the part that is open towards the public, which is edging to this utilitarian part that is, let's say, being extended outside the original building. Nowadays, this floor underneath is also used for smaller concerts. So there is also this kind of flexible usage that the Foundation Paradiso can make use of. Just the last jump, allow me to do that as we are looking at Amsterdam. We are looking, I've been explaining to you these fortification walls and the way they were kind of containing the historical city of Amsterdam. You can see the end of the fortification wall with the water in the middle of the picture, and well, when the railways is going inside the center of the city, you can see Central Station on your right hand, and you can see, if you follow the train track, you can see a split. The one going towards northwest and the one going only to west. Well, the railway line going only to west is the first railway line made in the Netherlands in the 1830s. 1839 is the first line between Haarlem and Amsterdam. And you can see a green area. This green area is called Westerpark. It's a very, very known park in the city of Amsterdam, not only for the design of the park itself, the historical park and the variety of use that this park entails, but also because it's a crucial position between the historical part of the city, the new extension of the city, and on the north side of the train, you might even, for the one of you being a little bit more trained in recognizing the design of the city of Amsterdam, there is a very famous neighborhood, the Spandarmerbuurt, that was designed by the Amsterdam School, where this fantastic building of Michael Leclerc is standing. You can see here, upper right, that's the Spandarmerbuurt with some very particular building of the Amsterdam School, and you can see the park. On your right hand, the historical park designed by Springer. In the middle part, the new park designed by Gustafsson, the American landscape architect. And you can see on your right hand the allotment gardens. The allotment gardens that are run by 3 different organizations. And there is, every time there is a different passageways taking place in a very subtle way, connecting the city with the southern part of the city with the northern part of the city. In the middle of the picture, you recognize a canal. This is the very first canal connecting Amsterdam to Haarlem. That's the trace, the remaining of it is still there. The one of 1631 I was talking about. So this is a kind of very, very interesting park. I'm just going closer, get closer. You can see some usage. Also very nice to point out, perhaps also referring to our program, at the lower part of this picture, you see the GWL terrain, which is a quite known interventions at the end of the 90s, the so-called EcoWeg, so the ecological district, which was quite an innovative housing project at that time, entailing much more green integrated with the housing projects, but also entailing already the fact that the one renting a house in this neighborhood or buying a house had to declare not to possess a car. So it is not allowed to ask for a parking permission if you have a house there. Already, I'm talking about the end of the 90s, but it's quite interesting also for the scheme, the typology, and how some existing elements are connected with the housing. So if you don't know that project, please look at that. On the top, you can see the Wester Park, the gas reservoirs that are turned or into water and on the front row, but also into an event building, the one in gray, very prominent in this picture. And you can see the different usage of the part of the park, particularly the big field where you see these squares and this tent-like, and the water. I'm just look at the water. I'm naming that because many students are dealing with this issue of the water. What is particular of this Western Park is that the artificial water getting into the park is getting different connotations. Either is connected to leisure, to the bigger green area that you can see in the middle of the picture, but it's also changing into a more pseudo-natural waterbed where other things are happening. I'm just showing a couple of pictures to get you the idea. This is the more leisure-oriented. Even in the late spring, summer, and the beginning of the autumn, there are people sunbathing in the area, overlooking the park and making use of this water-related. Don't forget, if you look at the left side of this picture, that right behind this, there is a railway line, which is not covered. It's just hidden, a little bit hidden, not completely hidden by the physiognomy of the park. And at the other side, it opens up to a much wider green area that has different purposes. Even big concert took place in this part of the park. So this is a more leisure-oriented, but also huge degree of flexibility in terms of events. And here you see the much more, a few yards away, you might say, the more constructed landscape effect with many more trees, many more intimacy, even places where you can be on your own. Don't forget that this is a very central park with many activities and a lot of events connected to the fashion industry of Amsterdam. But there is place also for yourself and to enjoy, let's say, some again constructed, I have to say, constructed natural elements in this part of the city. Okay, that was all. I think that's the presentation. I'm a little bit stuck with maybe I have to do this to detach. Yes. Thank you very much for your attention. And well, I give the word back to Martino, please.
Thank you very much, Roberto. It was a very stimulating and interesting presentation. I guess you have shown us many examples that are very useful for approaching the project within the area of Milan that we are considering now. If you allow me just a short comment about the presentation, the most interesting thing for me is having understood, let's say, sort of redefinition of the concept itself of the connection, because in general we are used to think about the connection as one of the first step of the project, especially at the university. It's a phase that we faced at the very first level of the project, so at the large scale. And the problem of the connection is something that has to do with the relations between the neighborhood, the urban spaces and whatever, so as to do with the highways, ring roads, underground lines, and this kind of level. I guess that from your explanation and the project that you have shown us, the theme of the connection is articulated in a very more level. So you have shown us up to the technological details of the project, saying that those technological solutions permit to establish new connections with the place. So this is a totally different level of connection, but it's something that has to do with the connection itself. So with the trees, with the surrounding buildings, with the water mirror, the first project, for example, that is a specific connection with the place. Probably the project that, at least to me, was most significant to understand this reflection is the one you have shown of the Yellow Bridge in Rotterdam, that one funded through crowdfunding, because as soon as you shown us the aerial view of the city, it was very clear the connection that was produced within the city. And the more you enter into the project, shown us other perspectives, other views of the same bridge, we were able to enter within the multitude of the connections that the architecture produced within the place. So through the materials, through the name of the people that founded the bridge, and so they saw their names represented on the bridge, the yellow color, and whatever, define a number of different connections within the place. And at least to me, this is a very important and interesting element to consider within our project in Porta Romana, because of course we have to solve the let's say, urban connections within the city, so understanding the new infrastructure that can sustain the new role of this urban district. But of course, we have to consider also the other levels of the connections that the architecture will produce within the place. This is the reason why I thank you very much for this very stimulating introduction. And if there are other comments or questions, we can take up 5-10 minutes for a common debate.
I can reply if there are no questions. I can reply to your comments, Martino, but let's wait for questions.
Maybe I have a question, Roberto. Maybe you can.
Oh, yes. Sebastian.
Well, first of all, I think, yes, I agree. It was a very stimulating presentation. Of course, for us that we are dealing with this kind of thing, connection for sure. It was very important. And in relation with that, I want to, if you can, let's say, share your experience in relation with these connections, more than with the elevated connections, no? That sometimes, and not always, but sometimes, I mean, the connection, even though they connect, the connection itself sometimes become deteriorated. And this happens, of course, there are contextual reasons, but probably there are also other reasons, yeah? Because, I mean, nowadays we see bikeways in some contexts that they work quite well, like in Denmark, for instance, no, they are fantastic, and they do not look deteriorated at all, no? But in other cases, they do. Or in China, I know you have been in China, I mean, for some reasons there, probably for political reason or whatever, but because of restrictions and so on, but all these pathways, no, elevated pathways, works quite well, they are clean, etc. But in other countries, it do not happen. I mean, do you know if you can comment if even for the students, if there are some clues what to do, what not to do in order to avoid deterioration of this path?
Yes, very interesting question, Sebastian, because indeed, as Martino was pointing out, and you picked on that, the connection, particularly when it is about, let's say, the project that we are dealing with and the other degrees of connection that could be, let's say, be established at the moment that we conceive a project is one issue. I mean, we have the issue of connecting with a context at that very time, at the time that we are operating. And indeed, also the experience of what has to be connected and why, and if at all connecting everything, because what you're pointing out, it's also a challenge nowadays in the city of Amsterdam. As you know, we are using bicycle all over the place, and there is now, because of the huge usage of bicycles, we have a huge congestion of bicycles in the center of Amsterdam, which is becoming even a burden in certain open areas like Westerpark, where there is very much a necessity now of taking apart pedestrian and bicycles because it's getting dangerous. So just to give you a degree of how things have been shifted in 10 to 15 years, and things will keep moving. I mean, as the vehicular traffic is getting more clean, we have electric bicycles. Let's not forget electric bicycles that will change completely the way we will access our cities. I mean, this is happening already in the Netherlands. There is a huge, quite drastic change of law took place just before the pandemic, not allowing electric bicycle to use a certain kind of bicycle path. Can you imagine that? This is already taking place. So there is very much a dynamic that is taking place that we cannot take under control. But as Martino was pointing out, I agree, there is something that we can point out, by means of, let's say, a broken line, something that we cannot know exactly what kind of connotation it will take, but we can foresee. So by means of what we do, we can foresee something, we can perhaps put forward a catalyst effect towards the connections, then has to take shape on itself. So the project of the connection, it isn't indeed necessarily the project that we are taking care of, but it's a project that goes into a dynamic of a line of thoughts. And this is the demonstration that we see in some of the interventions that I was telling to you, even in the Westerpark, there is this kind of struggle that are taken care of. Just few months ago, they delivered a new bicycle path, as I was saying, giving more space, dedicated space to pedestrians, because it was getting really very, very dangerous because of this issue of the bicycles. But of course, for Milan, it is also another challenge to kind of push forward a safe use of other means of transportation within the city, but also to combine that with accessibility and the use of green. So there is slightly another dimension taking place. But indeed, my final thought will be not connect everything because everything has to be connected, but be selective, think about priority of connections. What has to be connected and why? Why it makes sense today to connect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. If there are other comments or questions, or critics maybe. No. Corinna?
Nothing specific, just wanted to thank you. It was very, very inspiring. And maybe, Martino, you can remind also that there is the recordings on YouTube. There will be.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you very much
for the invitation. I hope it can be useful somehow for everybody in a way. I've tried to insert a couple of things around the projects, which is also something to be mentioned every time. There are many things happening out of our hands that at the end are making sense. Sometimes they make sense, sometimes they don't, but in many ways they do make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Also the path, the pedestrian path that you showed, the fact that it was completely done in crowdfunding, I agree with Martino. It's something that really reconnects not only parts of the city, but also the inhabitants with the project. So it's also part of.
Yes, and you are looking at a situation that was impossible to finance such a project from the actors and the forces that were owning those fragments of the city. So let's also be clear, the city is a city of property, it's a city of owning part of the ground, and those forces are quite diverging. So these kind of operations are sometimes necessary to kind of get to another level. And now that that project is a success, all these diverging forces are willing to cooperate to one another because they see the added value of being connected by this bridge, by this kind of, octopus-like operation. It's so popular. But, that's how things are going. And that was one of the products of the crisis. So these things are happening in the crisis, you get a little bit of a concession to use a certain area, and then new ideas are coming forward. That's why I was pointing out at the beginning that we don't have to be afraid to get out our disciplinary way of intending what we do and try to experiment something with somebody else, also with other people that are outside. We are now literally always inside as well, but they are outside of what we do. Yes.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Good luck to everybody, and see you most probably tomorrow with the other talk.
Perfect. Exactly.
Okay.
Next talk is tomorrow with Professor Sanchez and introduced by Elena Fioretto. And